Everyone sees Canada as the land of endless forests, but what if its most diverse one is already dying? Hidden in southern Ontario, this ecosystem once held a third of the nation's endangered species. Now, it's vanishing right under the country's nose. How did the world's symbol of preservation become the one erasing its own paradise? Canada is known for its endless forests and crystal-clear lakes, but there's a secret few people know. In southern Ontario, the Carolinian Forest Canada survives like a whisper from a greener past, hidden among skyscrapers, highways, and suburban neighborhoods. It's the kind of contrast that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the land of untouched nature. While most imagine Canada as a preserved paradise, this forest represents the opposite, the silent symbol of a Canada's vanishing ecosystem. In this region, concrete didn't arrive slowly. It devoured everything in a rush, erasing centuries of life in just a few decades. Today, every green fragment is a reminder that progress sometimes wears the mask of forgetfulness. The paradox is cruel. The country that inspires the world with its environmental policies has destroyed over 90% of its most diverse forest. A loss that few even noticed, one that redefines what preservation truly means. And the most intriguing part is that this last green remnant still breathes, as if guarding a truth modern Canada refuses to face. Can this forest still tell its story? The Carolinian Forest Canada is one of those phenomena that defy geographical logic. It's a temperate jungle that, by some natural irony, thrives in a latitude dominated by pine and snow. It's as if a piece of the American South got lost and, by miracle, took root in the cold heart of the North. This green line begins in the Carolinas and stretches all the way to southern Ontario, where it ends in an almost invisible fragment. Within this tiny patch blooms a biodiversity hotspot, home to more than a third of Canada's endangered species, all within less than 1% of the nation's landmass. A biological treasure shrunk to a living miniature, surviving against both time and oblivion. Seeing this forest is like finding a living fossil, something that shouldn't exist, yet stubbornly does. It's a reminder that nature has its own whims, and that sometimes the impossible just needs time to prove its worth. But what exactly created this climatic miracle capable of sustaining the impossible? The secret of the Carolinian Forest Canada lies in the air itself. The Great Lakes act as a climatic engine, forming a natural thermal bubble that turns southern Ontario into an unlikely refuge. Warm, humid winds soften the cold extremes, granting the region something rare in Canada: over 200 frost-free days a year. It's a kind of natural climate change in Ontario, a blanket of warm water wrapping the region, allowing species from Georgia and the Carolinas to thrive just miles from the Arctic. Trees that should never grow here flourish. Tropical birds appear where only crows should fly, and even temperate insects adapt with perfection. When nature wants, it bends its own rules. But that delicate balance comes at a cost. The same microclimate that once protected the forest is now betraying it. Shorter winters and unstable summers are unraveling the system that kept this ecological jewel alive for centuries. The question is, what happens when the miracle that created a paradise begins to destroy it? Walking through a fragment of the Carolinian Forest Canada feels like stepping into an impossible garden, where every tree seems to tell an ancient story. The giant tulip tree, for instance, was used by Indigenous peoples to carve canoes that crossed rivers centuries ago. The black walnut, prized for its dark, dense wood, became a symbol of endurance amid the destruction of southern Ontario forests. Among the treetops stands the blue ash, the only one of its kind in Canada, now on the brink of extinction. And there, beneath the cool northern shade, grows the pawpaw, a tropical fruit that tastes like banana and mango, yet survives deep into winter. It's the perfect image of a biodiversity hotspot that defies logic and proves that the impossible can bloom even under snow. This blend of species is more than botanical curiosity. It's a reminder of how life always finds cracks to grow through. even when everything seems lost. And if the trees tell stories, the animals are the characters still fighting to keep them alive. But who are the silent guardians of this collapsing ecosystem? In the shadows of the Carolinian Forest Canada, live creatures seemingly left behind by time. The Blanding's turtle, with its bright yellow throat and calm gaze, can live for more than 75 years, a living archive of the forest itself. Every spring, it crosses trails and streams as if reminding the world that there's still life in this Canada's vanishing ecosystem. Beside it, the five-lined skink darts swiftly and silently, the only lizard in Canada, a symbol of survival in a shrinking environment. And when night falls, the flying squirrel glides through the canopy, turning darkness into stage light. They are survivors of an advancing environmental fragmentation that spares no one. These animals live in a rare transition zone where northern and southern species coexist like old neighbors sharing the same backyard. Each one is a living frontier, a reminder that biodiversity thrives on improbable encounters. But what happens when the paradise that shelters them turns into farmland? In the 19th century, southern Ontario underwent a silent and devastating transformation. Settlers, enchanted by the soil's fertility, saw the southern Ontario forests as a promise of wealth and progress. Ancient trees were cut down in just a few years, replaced by crops and pastures. Within 2 generations, paradise became farmland, and farmland became business. The black walnut, oak, and tulip trees, once symbols of diversity, turned into raw material for agricultural expansion. The land yielded so much that no one thought about the ecological cost. It was the beginning of the Carolinian Forest Canada's collapse, an invisible loss many celebrated as progress. And like all easy riches, abundance became a curse. The soil's wealth became, ironically, the forest's death sentence. Each harvest brought profit, but erased a piece of Canada's natural past. It's the kind of paradox that makes you wonder, can progress exist without erasing its own roots? When the 20th century arrived, the plow gave way to pavement. Farms became cities, and the green of the Carolinian Forest Canada was swallowed by avenues, factories, and parking lots. What was once a biodiversity hotspot turned into a mosaic of fragments. Small patches of forest surrounded by concrete and highways. The new enemy had no axe, but a name: urban sprawl. It was a different kind of destruction, subtle and relentless. No fires, no chainsaws, just the steady advance of environmental fragmentation, breaking what was left of the wilderness into smaller and smaller pieces. Where birds once migrated, there are intersections. Where the wind once blew freely, there are traffic signs. The forest became a shattered mirror. Each shard still reflects beauty, but the whole is gone. And the saddest part, many people live above what was once a natural sanctuary without ever knowing. But what happens when these fragments become isolated, like islands cut off from life? Today, the Carolinian Forest Canada's greatest enemy isn't the axe, it's isolation. What remains of the forest survives as small green islands separated by miles of roads and suburbs. Each fragment functions as a lonely ecosystem, unable to exchange life with another, the silent beginning of a slow, invisible extinction. These areas suffer from what scientists call the edge effect: more heat, more wind, and constant invasions by non-native species. In many places, what should be forest is now a park with trees, beautiful on the outside, dead on the inside. It's the cruel portrait of environmental fragmentation, where the illusion of nature fools even the nation itself. The deepest wound is genetic. Entire populations of turtles and birds can no longer interbreed with others of their kind. A single highway can turn relatives into strangers in just 1 generation. The forest still exists, but does it still function as a forest? The highways slicing through southern Ontario are symbols of modern progress, but for the Carolinian Forest Canada, they're walls of concrete and steel. Every spring, hundreds of Blanding's turtles attempt to cross the asphalt, searching for new ponds, and many never make it. The same fate befalls squirrels, snakes, and birds driven by instincts older than the roads themselves. These routes that connect cities divide nature. It's one of the cruelest paradoxes of Canada's vanishing ecosystem. The more humans move, the less space remains for life to move. In seconds, the sound of tires replaces birdsong, and progress shows its price in silence. There are roads where the ground seems to pulse with lost life. And to think a few underpasses, guiding fences, or green bridges could change the fate of hundreds of species. The real question is, when did progress become a race without brakes? While the world watches major disasters, the Carolinian Forest Canada fights a war almost no one sees. It doesn't face tractors or flames, but a silent army of invaders: Asian beetles, European vines, and fungi spreading along the edges like conquerors. Each weakened tree becomes an open door, and the enemy doesn't need to be big to destroy. This invasion is the cruelest face of environmental fragmentation. The more the forest breaks apart, the weaker it becomes, like a castle without walls, where every gust of wind brings a new threat. And as winters shorten due to climate change in Ontario, these invaders no longer die in the cold, they thrive. The result is a forest that fights 24 hours a day, unseen. Branch by branch, root by root, it resists an enemy that doesn't sleep, doesn't retreat, and has no face. But what happens when the very climate that once protected it starts turning against it? The same microclimate that once created the Carolinian Forest Canada is now challenging it. The Great Lakes, once its thermal shield, have become mirrors of instability. Short winters and unpredictable summers trigger freeze-thaw cycles that break roots, dry soil, and confuse native species. Nature seems to have forgotten its own rules. Climate change in Ontario isn't a distant phenomenon, it's the new normal. Seasons no longer obey boundaries, and trees bloom out of time, vulnerable to sudden frosts. This climatic confusion favors invasive species, while native ones, slower to adapt, suffer quietly. The thermal refuge has turned into a thermal trap. It's a tragic irony. The same climate that sustained life for centuries is now its greatest enemy. The forest struggles to survive in a world changing faster than its leaves can grow. But what happens when the relationships within it, between plants, animals, and soil, begin to break apart too? The Carolinian Forest Canada isn't just losing trees, it's losing connections. What was once a living web of interactions has become a patchwork of loose threads. Bees vanish, flowers go unpollinated, seeds fall, but never germinate. The forest is forgetting how to live in community, the silent unraveling of an entire biodiversity hotspot. Ecologists call this a web collapse. When one species disappears, others follow like invisible dominoes falling. Without predators, pests multiply. Without pollinators, fruit stops growing. Without old trees, the soil loses its strength. Nature doesn't vanish overnight. It fades, like a memory erased by time. And so the question arises, can we still stitch this web back together before it tears completely? Maybe the answer lies with those who believe restoration isn't about returning to the past, but rebuilding the future. But who exactly is replanting hope? Not all is lost in the Carolinian Forest Canada. Amid the silence of broken trees, a movement of resistance is taking root. Parks like Rondeau, Long Point, and Point Pelay have become laboratories of conservation in Canada, where scientists, volunteers, and local communities replant trees, restore soils, and bring endangered species home. Every seedling is a silent promise of rebirth. Conservation in Canada isn't just an ecological effort, it's an act of faith. Hundreds dedicate weekends, holidays, even vacations to heal damaged lands. It's the work of generations, not weeks. And in every root planted lies an attempt to correct 2 centuries of mistakes. The forest's counterattack is slow but visible. Even with limited resources, these initiatives prove one essential truth: to restore is to remember. Because every tree that grows again is a recovered memory of what Canada once was, But do public policies keep up with this will to be reborn? Behind the beauty of recovering forests lies a battlefield few ever see: environmental politics. Conservation in Canada faces an enemy as dangerous as deforestation bureaucracy. Laws like the Endangered Species Act promise protection, but delays and lack of enforcement turn good intentions into forgotten papers in Ottawa drawers. While politicians preach sustainable growth, urban expansion continues pushing the southern Ontario forests further each year. Local governments are caught between economic growth and preservation urgency. The dilemma is cruel. How do you protect nature without stopping the city? And who decides what's worth more, a new building or a century-old tree? The result is constant stalemate. Restoration projects stall under tiny budgets, slow permits, and conflicting interests. The forest doesn't die from lack of love, it dies from lack of priority. Yet between politics and landscape, there are still places where the past breathes. What secrets survive in these last refuges? Stepping into one of the surviving fragments of the Carolinian Forest Canada is like walking through a portal. The air changes, sounds deepen, and every step awakens something ancient. Light filters through leaves as if time itself slows down. It's a piece of living history that the Canada's vanishing ecosystem refuses to let die. The ground is carpeted with leaves that have fallen for centuries, and the damp scent of soil tells stories asphalt could never understand. The wind moves the canopy with the same rhythm it had when the first peoples walked here, a reminder that the forest doesn't belong to the present, it merely tolerates it. To stand there is to feel both the weight and the grace of what Canada once was. These remnants are biological capsules, bridges between what remains and what might return. Even fragmented, the forest still pulses, as if asking for silence to tell its story. And maybe the real question isn't what we've lost, but what we can still learn from it. After all, what does it mean to preserve something that refuses to die? The Carolinian Forest Canada is more than a collection of trees. It's a genetic archive of an entire continent. Each root holds the memory of past climates, extinct animals, and peoples who once saw the forest as part of themselves. Protecting what's left of this biodiversity hotspot means preserving centuries of natural wisdom that Canada still carries, often without realizing it. This forest reminds us that conservation isn't just about saving species, it's about keeping alive the evolutionary memory that brought us here. When a tree falls, we lose more than wood. We lose information, culture, and a chapter of what it means to exist on this land. It's like tearing pages from a book we haven't finished reading. And maybe the nation's future depends on this, on remembering what it once was. Because deep down, every corner of this forest still echoes the sound of a past that refuses to fade. And if Canada's future begins with memory, perhaps everything begins by remembering the sound of this forest. The Carolinian Forest Canada isn't just fading, it's warning us. The most nature-loving country on Earth can lose its richest ecosystem. What chance does the rest of the world have? The question isn't whether the forest can survive, but whether we still care enough to let it. So if this story opened your eyes, don't just scroll away. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next chapter of our planet's survival starts with awareness, and it starts right here.